What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. Break MMA, and I'm here to talk about UFC Fight Night Abu Dhabi. Robert Whitaker versus Reiner the Ritter. But first, y'all know how we do it. We're starting out with the first fight of the card. Give me a second. I gotta scroll down. Martin Buday versus Marcus Buchecha. All right, so Marcus Buchecha is coming from one championship. He was a very um, how do I say that? He was a very Oh my god. He was a successful grappler. That's what I mean to say. He was a very successful grappler, starting out with BJJ. He is a BJJ world champ, multi world champ, and I think multi divisional as well. He is also one of the more commonly known grapplers in the world, actually, and um, he's making his UFC debut versus Martin Buday. Now, I'm gonna be honest. We know like one championship quality of fighter isn't always consistent, right? Especially not in the heavier weight classes, right? I think some of the only solid examples we've had have been um, Ben Askren and Reiner the Ritter, who's also fighting tonight. Um, but he also is pretty fresh in his career, so I'm not too sure where how I would predict this fight to go. I think I'm gonna have to go with Martin Buday just because he is kind of more experienced and just like him already being in the UFC for a couple of fights now. It's already proven his skill level and he's ranked. And I don't know if Buchecha really deserves a ranked opportunity this fast. No, good. Back up, up, up. Leave it. Good boy. Good boy. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to cut that out. All right, but now moving on to Muhammad Yahya versus Stephen Nguyen. Um, this one's kind of unknown for me. I'm not too familiar with Stephen Nguyen, but because we are in Abu Dhabi, we're more likely to get mismatch fighters. So I'm gonna go with Muhammad Yahya. I am actually pretty familiar. I'm somewhat more familiar with Yahya. Um, but not too much with the skill set. I don't really want to say too much and just kind of drag it on. I'm gonna go with Muhammad Yahya. Moving on to Ibo Iceland Aslan versus Billy Elikana. This one is a little bit um, risky to pick, just because Ibo Aslan isn't really amazing. He has good stand up and he has amazing knockout power at light heavyweight. But in certain scenarios, I don't think he's a proven grappler yet or has proven his takedown defense. So I think Billy Elikana has the potential for an upset. Now, is it likely? Not really. So I think I'm gonna go with Ibo Aslan by KO. I think it's still gonna happen. This obviously could end up being like some Robelis de Spain situation. Excuse me. But Billy Elikana, I think this is also his second fight in the UFC, and I think his first one was on short notice. So who knows? Maybe he looks a lot better coming up with the full camp versus an opponent who is still pretty fresh, who is still pretty green in his career. So you never know. I'm gonna probably go with Ibo Aslan though. Moving up on the card, we have Amanda Hebas versus Tabata Hichi. I'm gonna go with Tabata Hichi. I am a bigger fan of her. I am kind of going based off bias because I would like to see her win. I would like to see her move up in the ranks of women's MMA, but I do think that her last performance wasn't that great. I think Amanda Hebas has still um, proven herself to be a solid quality WMA fighter. So I think this can be a difficult fight for Tabatahichi. I think this probably goes to a decision. I believe she's pretty hard to finish. Let's double check this. Okay, so she lost to Dern. Oh, she gets submitted. Yeah, she got submitted. Oh shit. Okay. Uh, Damn. I might have lied, guys. I might have lied. I was trying to do that shit off the top of my head without really looking at any of these resumes. But let's see. Angela Hill. That's not really a great win. Lost to Jianan Yan. That's not a bad loss, really. 3 rounds with. Okay, yeah. I think I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm a little more confident on top of the Hichi pick. I'm gonna go top of the Hichi, and I think they're gonna also go to a decision. Moving on, we have Davy Grant versus Damon Blackshear. Now that we got some of the other fights out the way, I could probably talk about a little bit more of this one. Davy Grant is coming off of win. I don't tell me. I believe his name was Ramon something. Ramon something, right? Um, Davy Grant is still at a solid stage in his career where he's still able to put up good performances over younger fighters, hungry fighters, prospects, and it's still like I said, he's still able to beat them and keep up. And he has the X factor of his power. He actually has a lot of power. Um, like Michael Bisping was saying, and he was spamming. He was like, Davy Grant's really underrated. I think he kind of is. I think he doesn't really have a high ceiling, but in terms of like overall skill set, he is kind of underrated. He's very well rounded, I would say, and he's not one to break when facing adversity in the cage. Damon Blackshear, he is better known as a grappler because he got the twister. He has like I think 2 twister submissions in the UFC, which is pretty insane. His last fight was, I believe, losing to Mario Batista. Okay, no, that might have been. Oh shit! Wait, is that the wrong one? Oh my god, I'm talking about some shit long ago. He lost to Montel Jackson, 18 seconds in the first fight. Beat Cody Stamen. That's a good win. Beat Cody Gibson. Submitted him. That's also a solid win. And then beat Alatang. So he is on a 3-fight win streak. He is more active though, which is something that I do like. But like, all right, now that we've looked at him, let's look at Ramon Tavares. Um, Davy Grant beating Ramon Tavares, losing to Daniel Marcos, which I don't know. I don't count that as a bad loss only because Daniel, like, especially it being a split decision, Daniel Marcos is kind of known for like just barely squeaking out these wins, right? And sometimes winning undeservedly. So I'm probably gonna go with I don't know. I think Davy Grant's probably the underdog in this, right? I don't know. Okay, hold on. Let's look at this. Let's look at the best grappler that Grant has probably faced. Damn, I don't want to go too far in his career because a lot of these seem to be strikers, right? Adrian Yanez, striker, lost. Rafael Sunsao, he beat by submission. Okay, so you know what? This is like the only thing that we could probably go base off of. But even then, that's not that great. Daniel Marcos, he's more of a striker who can also clinch. So I don't know how I feel about that one either. Ramon Tavares, this one took place mostly on the feet. So, man, nine wins by submission. So it's in his arsenal, but it just hasn't been throughout his UFC career as much. More so in his amateur stage. I don't know if I think he could withstand. All right, because look, right, this is what I'm looking at. With Blackshear, I'm looking at his loss to Montel Jackson in the first round. Davy Grant also has a lot of power in his hands, right? And I think that he would be able to withstand some of the takedown threats of Blackshear. But Blackshear is very crafty with his grappling exchanges and scrambles. So I think if given the opportunity, he would be able to maybe sneak a back take, sneak in some submissions from any other grounded positions. Maybe not so much standing, right? I think Davy Grant can maybe stall out on the cage. Ha. You know what? I was originally like before I was gonna make this video. I was originally thinking I was gonna go Davy Grant, but I kind of want to go with Damon Blackshear. But this one is kind of close. This is kind of like 60-40 in my head. I think 60 Blackshear, 40 Grant. I don't think this is going to be. Both fighters have finishing potential, but both are. I don't know. I don't know. I think both are somewhat equally matched. Oh, my gut's telling me Blackshear. My gut's telling me Blackshear. As much as I wanted to go for David Graham, my gut is telling me Blackshear by decision. All right, moving up to one of the funner fights on the card: Muslim Salikov versus Carlos Leal. I'm gonna go with Carlos Leal. I believe he had a great performance over Alex Morono, who actually, you know what, isn't that really good. But he also did have a solid performance over Rinat Fakhretdinov. And as we can see, he has 10 wins by knockout, 10 first round finishes. Both of them, both fighters, actually have a lot of knockout potential in their arsenal. Muslim Salikov, more with his dynamic striking and kicks, is able to pull these things off. I believe he's coming off his last fight, his last win. Yep, was a KO. He also beat Ponzinibbio and lost to Randy Brown. Um, he is pretty old. He is pretty old as well. He didn't seem that bad in his last performance, so I don't want to say that he's lost a step. But as you age, that's just what happens. Regardless of if you look good in your last fight, like if we just look at Dustin Poirier, like his last fight was against Islam, right? And he looked great. And if that version of Poirier had came in versus Max, maybe it could have been different. But that wasn't really that far apart in terms of like time span. It might have been like just under a year. And if we look back at Salikov, his fight was just under a year ago as well. Carlos Leal has been the more active fighter, having 2 fights this year already, and Muslim Salikov being out for a year and some change, or maybe just under a year. But he's pushing that mark. Maybe like 8 months, right? When's November? It's like a couple months from now, like 3 months. I was probably like 9 months. He's been out for 9 months so far. I'm gonna go with Carlos Leal. I think that's the more comfortable pick for me. I think he's also the favorite. And I agree with that. I think he should be. He has a lot more life in his career to give. And Salikov is, him being like 40, 41, he's pushing the end of it. So I'm going to go with Carlos Leal. And then moving on to the headliner of the prelims, Bryce Mitchell versus Said Nurmagomedov. This one is I have mixed feelings about. Because for one, Bryce Mitchell is moving down. And we have to consider what that is going to do to his chin. And I've seen some of the pictures of the photo ops, and he looks okay. Like he definitely looks like he lost weight somewhat comfortably, but obviously dehydrating yourself is always going to play a part into how well you recover, especially because he is cutting more weight. He's gonna have to recover more, so there is no telling in how his body is going to feel in the cage. And him being on a 2-fight losing streak, it also makes me kind of wary. But if we're going like skill for skill, like all right, if we look at the striking of Bryce Mitchell versus Said Nurmagomedov, I'm looking at Said to have the advantage in the striking. I haven't seen Said do well in the grappling exchanges or getting takedowns as much in recent times, but like it seems to have been more of excuse me, I had a burp. More of like clinching rather than getting full takedowns. And even when he hasn't been able to hold them down. And we know Bryce Mitchell is a very strong grappler. That's his best skill set in MMA. So, it's really hard because Saeed has some solid power that could touch Bryce Mitchell, and like I said, with the concern of his recovery and his chin at this stage again of his career. Um, Saeed could touch it with one of his kicks, with a knee, because he does have a somewhat stronger Muay Thai kickboxing style than the other Nurmagomedovs. Uh, this one's like kind of 50-50, 55-45. I want to root for Bryce Mitchell. I really do. I don't know. I don't know. All right, let's look at the resumes. Let's look at the resumes real quick. Last loss to I forgot his first name. Fuck. He just fought. Vinicius Oliveira, sorry. Beating Gafarov, that's a good win, and losing to decision to Jonathan Martinez. Right? These are his last 3 fights. I'm not gonna go any lower. The Gafarov was a good win. This one was debatable. A lot of people thought Nurmagomedov did enough to get the nod. I thought Martinez did enough to get the nod, but that was also it was a very closely contested fight. Vinicius Oliveira, like what I didn't like against this fight is that Saeed Nurmagomedov gassed out kind of early trying to outstrike Vinicius Oliveira. And I don't know if maybe that was just like an ego thing or if he was just testing it out or if he had some kind of injuries or blah blah blah. But that's his most recent performance, and this is his fight coming up after that performance. And like if we look at Bryce Mitchell's resume, his last loss was to John Silva, who is probably one of the better fighters at featherweight right now, right? Like he's top 10, but he could probably be in the top 5 just based off skill for skill quality. He beat a Kron Gracie, which I wouldn't count this. Actually, you know what? Having gone 3 rounds with Kron Gracie, I don't know how I feel about that. But also just because Kron Gracie is pretty solid at just like time wasting. Right? Like he makes 15 minutes feel like an hour. That's what it feels like watching Kron Gracie fight. And then obviously we all know he got knocked out by Josh Emmett. So like fuck man, like the question of his chin is really the turning point of my decision. I don't know. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm not trying to drag this out. I just really can't make a decision. Um man. Man. Oh man, because look, if Bryce Mitchell loses this fight, he's getting sent into this kind of purgatory where I feel like he's not gonna know whether to stay in bantamweight or to move back up into featherweight, right? And if he loses this fight, I know it says he's number 15, but he's gonna remain unranked and fighting other tough unranked bantamweights. Like if Bryce Mitchell loses this fight, he might just be turned into food for Payne Talbot, or he might just become a bounce back fight for like Felipe Lima. You know what I'm saying? Or like he might fight Miles Johns. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about right now. Like in terms of his career. God, I really, man, I'm gonna go with Saeed. I have to go with Saeed. I want to root for Bryce Mitchell. I am rooting for him to get the win, but like it just doesn't feel safe. Like I feel safer picking Saeed Nurmagomedov just based off of his skill set, and because I know that because of his camp and where he's coming from, I know that he has the ability to grapple. Like I know he's not a bum on the ground. He just prefers to strike. So I think I'm gonna go with Saeed. Probably by decision. He does have the abilities to finish this fight earlier on, but Bryce Mitchell is, of course, we still have to respect him, a solid fighter at most. So I think it's probably gonna go the full 3 rounds. And now starting the main card, the opening fight of the main card, we have Nikita Krylov versus Bogdan Guskov. Um, Nikita Krylov is coming off of a KO loss to Dominic Reyes, and Bogdan Guskov is coming off of a win over Ryan Spann, which I don't know how much I rate that. I don't know how much I rate that, but he does have scary power. Oh, sorry. I don't know why it did that. He does have scary power, right? So I think for this batch, let's look at the height and reach difference. All right. I don't usually do that for the other ones because sometimes you can just go based off of like name value or just performance and just match up in terms of like if it's striker grappler or grappler, you know, like like the ones in the prelims are kind of more um they're more predictable, I guess. You know what I'm saying? It's easier to go for those. Now Nikita Krylov is definitely way more experienced, and I think he still has the potential to win this fight. You know what I'm saying? Like Nikita Krylov was a like look, he has a submission win over Ryan Spann, KO loss over Reyes. Yeah, he's beat Volkan Ozdemir, and he's beat Alex Gustafsson, which are all solid fights. Now he doesn't fight often, which I don't like, but you know he has tons of finishing potential, and Guskov is still pretty um green in the UFC and in terms of facing. Why is it this is tripping out right now. This is tripping out right now. And he's still pretty green in terms of just like fighting quality fighters at light heavyweight. Do I consider Ryan Spann a solid light heavyweight? I didn't before and I still don't now even though he's a heavyweight. Um it's just the concern of Krylov's chin and Guskov's power. Who do I think like in terms like the Krylov has power, yes, but I don't like that he's coming off of that loss. I don't like that. It's very concerning. I think skill for skill Krylov is better than Guskov at this moment, but I just think Guskov is kind of scary. He's kind of one of the scarier matchups for a Krylov right now. I'm not trying to just go off based off his hype to be honest either. But I think I'm gonna go with Guskov. You know this seems to be like one of those picks where like if I had went for Krylov, I like it probably he probably would get knocked out. If I went for Krylov thinking skill for skill would matter, like he would get knocked out, in some BS scenario like that. Um, so I think I'm gonna go with Guskov. I think he is gonna manage to find a KO somewhere in this fight. Uh, yeah, I think he's probably gonna get it done within the first 2 rounds, or maybe like just earlier in the third. But anyway, moving on to Asu Amabayev versus Jose Ochoa. Now this is one of the more interesting fights for me because guys, I don't know if y'all know, if y'all don't know, I like flyweight. I love flyweight. It is one of my favorite divisions in the UFC. That's not me trying to sound like a fake hardcore. I actually do enjoy and tune in to most fight night prelims just to watch the flyweight fights, right? And Jose Ochoa is one of those flyweights that I actually am kind of hyped behind. I knew he was on the Dana White Contender Series, but I don't watch that as much because it's hard to keep up with some of these things sometimes. And I wasn't sure. Like I had picked against him versus Cody Durden in his debut fight, but seeing how that turned out, Jose Ochoa getting the a 20-second knockout in the second round. Um, I kind of want to go for Ochoa. You know, also Mabayev hasn't. He had a pretty bad performance versus Minel Kopp. I believe that was the last fight. And Jose Ochoa is a very talented fighter. He's a very talented prospect. He has good striking. He seemed to show some solid takedown defense, honestly, in this fight versus Cody Durden, being able to get up, and negating some of the offensive grappling of Cody Durden, who, maybe Cody isn't that great just because he has no chin anymore, right? He's suffered 3 knockout losses in a row, losing to Bruno da Silva, who he was beating before he got knocked out. What else? Losing to Joshua Van by knockout as well. I think that was by knockout. And also getting knocked out by Jose Ochoa. So some people were saying that Durden is washed, and that could be two things can be true at the same time. He could be washed, but he could also still have the offensive grappling that was needed for Jose Ochoa to experience, to be able to understand what he's gonna be up against versus Asim Bayev. Now, one thing I don't like though is that Durden's grappling isn't at the same level as Amabayev, and that Ochoa is coming up on short notice. I think that Ochoa seems to be one of those guys that trains year round. Um, he seems to be in shape even now. He doesn't seem to be too big for the weight class, and he also does have a height and reach advantage over Aso Mabayev. If we look here, Aso Mabayev is 5'3". Honestly, he could be a little bit shorter than that, to be honest. 65-inch reach. Jose Ochoa with the being 5'7" with a 2-inch reach advantage. He is a lot greener, but like I don't know. I like Asu. I think Asu is a very solid fighter at flyweight in the rankings as well. But I think Ochoa is able to replicate somewhat the style of Manel Kape, or at least the being able to implement the game plan that he needs to be able to be in Asombayev. And I kind of want to just go Jose Ochoa purely based off of because I think he has that chance, right? I'm kind of betting on Jose Ochoa to be this new prospect at flyweight. I don't know why. I just think he can be, right? I just think he can be this new guy at flyweight. We already had Joshua Van, and we had Ramazan Temarav, and we even had, like, even before them, we had Steve Erceg coming in, right? So this could easily be a 3-round grapple fuck of Asombayev over Jose Ochoa, right? But like I said, I believe in Jose Ochoa. So I'm going to go with Jose Ochoa. I don't think he has power at flyweight, but I don't think he's going to get the KO within 3 rounds, right? I think he's going to be putting on more significant damage on Amabayev that would help him win the rounds. We're just going to have to see how he does with the submission attempts and the ground game of Amabayev. All right. Moving on to Shar Magomedov versus Marc-Andre Barriault. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, guys. I'm going with Shar Magomedov. Yes, he lost to MVP, but MVP is miles better than Marc-Andre Barriault. And Shar Magomedov is also miles better than Marc-Andre Barriault because he kind of has no chin, right? And he's also just not really that great. I don't like to disrespect these guys and say they're trash and say they're ass, whatever. But I think this is obviously a free win for Magomedov, or at least it's supposed to be. Barriault, he's coming off a win over Bruno Silva, who also isn't that great, and I think he also lost to Shar Magomedov. Got KO'd by him later in the fight. I think Magomedov with his kicks is going to be able to keep Barriault at range. He's not going to really allow him to get in too close. And if he does, Magomedov is going to throw something crazy. Like, he's going to throw some type of spinning kick, or he's going to throw some other dynamic strike that's going to catch Barriault off guard and, and hurt him, drop him, and knock him out. I don't know about flatline, but it's going to definitely be a knockout loss for burials. So I'm gonna go with Shara Magomedov. And I would bet on that as well. I might bet on that. All right. Moving on to the co-main event: Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee. How do I start this? I don't know why Marcus McGee got even matched up with Peter Yan. If Marcus McGee was gonna fight anybody at bantamweight, it should have been Chito Vera. It should have been Chito Vera or Henry Cejudo, but I know Henry. I like Henry, but Henry Cejudo, he still thinks he's worthy of fighting only name value opponents. Where at this stage of his career, it's either fight somebody, get a win, or get out. You're like 0-3 now. You're only getting older. You're not really getting any better. There isn't much opportunities for you. But in terms of just skill for skill, Peter Yan is still maybe not the prime of his powers, but he's kind of gotten the second wind in his career, right? He's on a winning streak now. I forgot over Song Yadong, which was a great fight. This was a great fight. This is a great comeback fight to have after the Marab win. After the Marab loss, and he's also beat a Figgy. I would say though, Figgy didn't show up that great in that fight. So he did kind of, he didn't perform that well over Davison, because that was somewhat the ghost of Figueiredo. But I think even mildly an underperforming Peter Yan can still secure 3 straight rounds over Marcus McGee. Now, don't get me wrong. Marcus McGee is pretty quick and powerful for a bantamweight. He has solid boxing. Like, this is gonna be an entertaining fight. I believe. But he lacks an ability to check leg kicks, right? He seems susceptible to those, and Peter Yan, he is a boxer. He does prefer his striking style, but he is known to mix it up very well. And I think that if he chooses to go the path of least resistance, he can absolutely just toy with Marcus McGee in getting these trips and landing kicks and the boxing exchanges and the combinations, body shots. I just think this is a terrible matchup for Marcus McGee. And it's too early for him, right? At his age, right? Because he really isn't that young either. At his age, you would hope for an opportunity like this, and for him, I would hope for him that he can rise up to the occasion and give himself, how do I say this? Keep his dream alive, of being a champion, right? Like, this is a dream scenario for Marcus McGee at his age and the stage of his career. But I think Peter Yan isn't. I just don't think he beats Peter Yan, guys. I just can't see it. But Marcus McGee is pretty durable. He does have a lot of heart. So I don't know if Peter Yan can get the finish. It's always a possibility. But all I know is I'm going with Peter Yan. I think Peter Yan is gonna win, and I can say that pretty confidently. Now for the main event: Robert Whittaker versus Reiner de Ritter at middleweight. Sorry. A lot of people are going with Reiner de Ritter, and I don't know. I just don't like that pick. I feel like he's being slightly overrated. He is a lot more massive than Whittaker, like just physically more imposing, even though he is built kind of weird, right? He's 6'4". He's very dense. He has longer reach over Rob. I just don't think, like, when people were explaining, like on TikTok and stuff, their reasoning for choosing a Reiner de Ritter, I couldn't really get behind it, because they would always just say the submission loss over Hamza and him losing to somebody bigger like DDP. And it's like, guys, Reiner de Ritter really isn't as explosive as either of those guys. Reiner de Ritter isn't going to just blast double leg Robert Whitaker against the cage, and then get a rear naked choke, right? Like that's not really his style. That's he hasn't even shown to be that in the UFC. If we look at his fight versus GM3, you know he even gassed out in that fight. He gassed out on this fight. That went into the third round. He obviously didn't end up end up getting the win over GM3, getting a submission win, but I don't like that he gassed out on that one. Even in his fight versus Holland, right? Holland. Um, he wasn't like the blast double leg kind of guy that was just gonna that was gonna impose his will on you and bring you into deep waters and stuff. Like when he submitted Holland, it was pretty slow. It was more like Anaconda like, right? I'm not trying to be National Geographic in here, but it was more Anaconda. It was more slow. It was more controlled. It was um it was good positional awareness from him. Um, I don't think. Also, he does have a little bit of power. I will say that he does have a little bit of power, but his striking is pretty mid as well. I think Robert Whitaker is too experienced in these scenarios, and even though he didn't get to show it off in the fight versus Hamza because of the jaw surgery or the jaw injury, sorry, I think him being in that camp and going through another heavy grappling intensive camp, I think he's going to be well prepared enough to handle the grappling of Reiner de Ritter. And Whitaker was never that terrible of a grappler to begin with. I think Robert Whitaker is definitely the more explosive fighter, and he is the better striker in this matchup. And I think he's going to be able to point fight Reiner de Ritter. I think he has that ability to point fight him through 5 rounds. If Reiner Ritter is able to maintain his cardio enough up until the fourth, maybe there maybe there's going to be some issue. But if there's even signs of him gassing out in that second or third round, he's getting finished in the fourth or fifth. Like this is a Robert Whitaker who's looking for his second win. He's looking for another jump or another shining moment in his career to get back in the win column and stuff. I just think this is too big of a jump in competition from Kevin Holland to Robert Whitaker. I don't like that for Reiner de Ritter. I think it's too early for him. I would have preferred if he had a slower grind, like if he had fought anybody else at like 8 to like 12 to prove himself. Because I think like Reiner Ritter might even struggle against Brandon Allen, or he might even struggle against Marvin Vittori, right? So yeah, like we all know Robert Whitaker, we all know his game plan and how he moves and how he fights and such. But I know he's coming off of a loss and all, and like losing streak even. But I'm still going with Robert Whitaker, guys. I think he can still get it done at this stage of his career. He still has a lot of he still has a lot left in the tank, and I'm kind of confident that he's able to get it done. I'm not too sure if it's gonna be by a finish though, but I think that Robert Whitaker can win this fight. All right, that was all. Let me know your predictions down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and